Liverpool's Champions League campaign has come to an end. The European dream is no longer there. A 1-0 defeat to PSG at Anfield, followed by a 4-1 defeat on penalties. Bruising night for the Reds, not least for the injuries we picked up, and that we'll talk about later as well. But penalties really is the most painful way to go. It's such a lottery. It's down to luck. It's the most stressful thing as well because you've got to watch each player walking. I mean, for them itself, it's obviously incredibly stressful. But even as a fan, waiting for each penalty to come by, and then as soon as it starts going against your team and you feel that tide turning, it is just a sinking feeling until the nail is finally in and your team are out. Or maybe there's a comeback. In this case, it wasn't to be. PSG through, and honestly, over the two legs, deservedly so. You know, like this game really felt kind of like a reverse of the first leg where we were really poor, very, very lucky to get through. But the luck switched and it was on PSG's side for this game, though I would say obviously they created a lot of good chances, so that was the difference. We obviously didn't really create much at all and somehow won that first leg. But PSG over the full two legs, they deserve to go through. And if there's any silver lining for us in this defeat, is obviously that we have a cup final coming up on Sunday, the Carabao Cup final, and we're in a very, very strong position in the Premier League. So it could still be a very good season, but it's very disappointing to go out the Champions League. And I think the worst thing is the timing of it. It's just come back off a weekend where we've extended our lead at the top of the league to 15 points over Arsenal following their draw and our win. And it just looks like we should canter to the league title win from here. Like, it should be pretty straightforward. And then a cup final on Sunday. So you're thinking, like, the Champions League would have been nice to have an extra thing to push for, really get the players to step up for and try and go all the way and give it their all. But it's not meant to be. And for PSG, they deserve it. So you just got to roll with it and move on. Hopefully now the players will pick themselves up for the League Cup final on Sunday, because that is a trophy to be won and it's still an important one. And as for the match itself, obviously there was a lot of good chances early on. Mohamed Salah had two really good chances. Van Dijk had one as well. There were a lot of good chances throughout the night. Obviously some scares we had to survive as PSG had chances of their own too. But it went all the way to penalties. And the one thing I would say is, you know, with a bit of hindsight now, it's a couple of days on. It was Wednesday night. I'm recording this on a Friday. The penalties weren't that bad. The two misses, like, we shouldn't be too harsh on Nunez or Jones. Nunez especially, I think his was decently struck. Donnarumma guesses right, saves it well. Same for Jones, but perhaps not so well struck. There was a bit of a bobble, it looked like, on the way. There wasn't too much conviction behind either strike, but if those, like, you know, the keeper goes the wrong way, you're not criticising the quality of those pens. They were decently struck. Donnarumma is just a very, very good goalkeeper for penalty shootouts, and you're left with this kind of sinking feeling of what ifs, isn't it? Because of those missed chances and all that. Also, you think of this penalty shootout, Alisson very nearly keeping that Vitinha shot out on the first one. If anything, that was probably the more stinging moment, because Alisson guessed right, got a hand to it, and it was probably the poorest penalty of the entire set of we had 3 penalties there for. So out of 7 penalties, that was probably the worst struck one, and somehow it scrubbed its way in, and that would have really put the momentum with us. But it happens. These guys stepped up. They gave, you know, they took on the responsibility. Unfortunately missed, but I wouldn't be too harsh on either of them. And I think over the course of the two legs, there was a lot more lacking than just those 2 penalties. Unfortunately, the woe didn't stop at just the performance and crashing out the Champions League. There were a couple of injury scares. Kanate won, thankfully. I think it looked in the moment more fatigued than anything, and it should be that way. So he may even start the League Cup final on Sunday. But for Trent, that looked worrying. We're yet to find out the full extent of it, but could he have played his final game for the club, let alone the fact that he's almost certainly missing the League Cup final on Sunday? If this keeps him out of the season, we don't know what his contract situation is going to be as it runs out in the summer. If he does go, as he already played his last game for the club, now that would be crushing. But hopefully he does extend his deal, and hopefully we do see him before the end of the season. I'd love to see him play on Sunday. It's very, very unlikely, but hopefully the injury is not too serious. Now getting on to Mohamed Salah, it was a very disappointing evening for him. He had a couple of big chances early on, 4th and 6th minute, I think it was. 2 real chances that you think he usually would take. Unfortunate not to score them. And then, yeah, for the rest of the game, it didn't have as much influence perhaps in terms of like getting real chances. Smashes his penalty in the penalty shootout, really, really well struck. So for him, though, you could see it was emotionally a big toll. And I think there's still doubts, obviously, whether this will be his last season for Liverpool or not, whether he's going to sign that contract. But more so as well, is he's having a superb season. He's been one of the front runners for the Ballon d'Or. And we know, unfortunately, even though it's an individual award, trophies play a big part, and the Champions League is probably one of the biggest, except for when, you know, there's a Euros or a World Cup going on. Champions League is often looked at as one of the big ones. So for him, this was a big blow, not just not winning it, but not getting deep into the competition, you know, like semi-finals or finalists. Out in the round of 16 is really going to hurt his chances. Obviously, if he can still lift the Carabao Cup in the Premier League, continue putting up incredible numbers, he'll be in with a shout for sure, but it does feel like that ship may have just started to sail away from him now. And, the likes of Rafinha or Harry Kane, even Kylian Mbappe, and Dembele as well with his late performances of late, these guys now have the opportunity to kind of take siege in that race for a Ballon d'Or. And listen, ultimately, win the Premier League, win trophies with Liverpool. Winning trophies with your club will always be the most important thing, but it just sucks because this guy is a player who's very much capable of winning a Ballon d'Or. And then finally, this loss at home to PSG in the Champions League actually it was revealed a crazy strat that I did not even know was as bad as it is, but one win in our last 7 Champions League knockout games at Anfield. This is Champions League knockouts only, so it doesn't even include the 3-0 loss at home to Atalanta in the Europa League last year. Anfield is known for being a fortress, especially those European nights at Anfield, but they've not been hitting the same way clearly in terms of the results. The atmosphere is always electric, but performances now, that is poor. 1 win in 7 is crazy. And that is something we're going to have to repair, because the Champions League is probably the most exciting and the most, as a trophy, it's probably the one that means the most and has the biggest connection with Liverpool as a club, having won it 6 times already. So let's get the Premier League done this year, but next year, let's make that one right.